Hi and welcome to a very important topic, very sensitive topic of related to data privacy and more specifically to the data anonymization. So let me explain first a few things. To start, if a user doesn't give you an explicit consent for using his personal data, like for example, I don't know, street address, geolocation information, IP addresses, then simply you cannot take his data at all. However, it's possible until some privacy regulation like GDPR in Europe to use data that is fully anonymized so that you cannot simply identify the person or the user who made a given action. So when the user gives you his consent, it's very easy. You take the record as it, eventually you apply some data cleansing transformations, maybe you enrich it with some external information, and you can use the data as it. However, when there is no consent, meaning that the user doesn't want to be identified, well, in theory you can still use the data, but only as long as it doesn't identify a user. So here we had two examples. The first example is a click action. So we want to know whether a user clicked on an ad. Here we have all the information like IP, age, address, maybe user ID. So we can correlate the action to the user and maybe probably in our machine learning algorithms apply some recommendations to him in order to provide a better return on investment to our advertisers. But on the other hand, of course, we will probably spam our user very lot with this ads information, and when the user doesn't give the consent, that's maybe one of the reasons why he don't want to share his information with us. But even though the user doesn't give a consent, we may still want to apply some analytics, general analytics on these actions. And for example, do not lose this click action in our clicks impressions dashboard, because here typically the click add action and the fact whether the click was an error or not is not anything that we can assign to a specific user. Here we can see that we only have the information about the action and the outcome. There is no information about the user at all. So if somewhere in our data system we have a dashboard to show the stats of ads, clicks, and the outcome ratio per day, well, we can of course take this and ingest until this final part and have a complete view of our system and of the actions possible to make on our user, by our users. Otherwise, you would probably lose a lot of click ads events, and who knows, maybe it will make your business at risk because you will miss some click actions and your advertisers won't pay enough. Where to anonymize this data? So the user is located typically here, and he or she is not necessarily aware of what's going in there. And the role for the place, for me, the good place for data anonymization is the data producer, because here we are the guarantee that all the data that is landing in our system is valid from the privacy rules under which we are living. So here we don't have any user information, and it's very easy. Technically, we can also try to anonymize this data in data cleansing part, but well, you will have to check it out if it's valid from the legal standpoint, because in the end you will have the user private data here, which will not be ideal from keeping this data outside your system. And technically, what are the strategies for the data anonymization? So you can apply different strategies. You can remove some data, literally, like here with IP. You can substitute it with, for example, the undisclosed IP. which in case maybe depending on the scenarios, but it may be easier to explore in the dashboards. You can also do some aggregate. So for example, here, when you have some age, you can represent it as a range, but beware of that because it can still be a PII data, because for example, if you have only one user with of 98 years old, if you have, for example, 98 years old user, even though you apply the range here, you will be able to identify it in your system. So yeah, there is always to take with special care. And you can also add some noise, either with some regular or irregular random logic. For me, the easiest way is always to remove the attributes so that we don't have any questions about the method. But of course, somewhere you may need something different. And please notice also that here you can change the type. So when you add some noise or aggregate, substitute, it can transform from integer to string, it can transform from integer to a range of integers. So there is also some implications on the schema of your data consumers of this for this data. And that's maybe the most important most important takeaway from this lesson. Always ask your chief data officer or a person that is specialized in these data privacy regulations. So be aware that you can remove the private data, but if your CDO or any other data privacy person tells you that, well, in our system we cannot do that for this or this reason, well, you have no choice. They are specialized on it and probably know better, much more about law rules and legal rules than you. And yeah, it's better to learn them in order to avoid fines. And that's all for this lesson. We are not yet done with data cleansing, and hopefully we will be able to pass to another layer of this data cleansing in a few next lessons. Meantime, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.